Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change and got a few interesting things to bring you today. I'm going to start off just with some climate news or things happening in the world. There's a hurricane. Hurricane Rosa is in the Pacific, and Hurricane Rosa to downgrade to tropical storm before making landfall in Mexico. It's from Timothy Clemens from the Tucson KVOA.com website. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says Rosa should still be at tropical storm force when it hits the Baja California Peninsula Monday with flooding rains. It's then expected to move quickly northwestward as it weakens, bringing 2 to 4 inches of rain to the Mogollon Rim of Arizona and 1 to 2 inches of the rest of the desert Southwest, Central Rockies, and Great Basin. Some isolated areas might be more. Rosa still has a maximum sustained winds of 85 miles per hour early Sunday, and it was centered at about 355 miles southwest of Punta Eugenia in Mexico. It's heading north at 12 miles per hour. So yeah, it's been bringing kind of interesting weather here. We're kind of getting the, it's actually quite warm, but it's a little more tropical, like tropical warmth. And we're supposed to be getting some rainfall, hopefully, in the early part of this week. And we need it. The trees here need it. So, hopefully that can come and kind of saturate us a little bit. But who knows? The way that, the rain works in Southern California it's always a surprise. It really rarely ever pans out. If rain is predicted, it pans out probably 20% of the time, if even that. It usually ends up being pretty paltry. So also, as you all probably heard, there was a earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia, not necessarily climate related, but there is an uptake in earthquake activity. Of course, warming brings many things to the earth. Warming from without can definitely, I think definitely a warming atmosphere could probably lead to geological changes, and who knows if it's directly climate related, but there seems to be an uptick in earthquakes. So the death toll from the quake tsunami disaster rises to 832, with officials saying it's likely to increase. This is from Al Jazeera. The death toll from an earthquake that prompted a tsunami on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi has risen to 832, the National Disaster Mitigation Agency has said, adding it assessed the affected area to be bigger than initially thought. Many people were reported trapped in the rubble of buildings brought down in the magnitude 7.5 earthquake, which struck on Friday and triggered tsunami waves as high as 6 meters, 20 feet. Agency spokesman Sutopo Purwo Nugroho told a news conference. Amid the leveled trees, overturned cars, concertinaed homes, and flotsam tossed up to 50 meters inland, survivors and rescuers struggled to come to grips with the scale of the disaster. Indonesian President Joko Widodo arrived on the island of Sulawesi on Sunday to take stock of the situation. Dozens of people were reported to be trapped in the rubble of a hotel and a mall in the city of Palu. A young woman was pulled alive from the rubble of the Roa Roa Hotel, the news website Detik.com reported. The owner of the hotel said that up to 60 people were believed trapped in the rubble. We managed to pull out a woman alive from the hotel Roa Roa last night, Mohammed Xiao Yugi, head of the National Search and Rescue Agency, told AFP News Agency. We even heard people calling for help there yesterday. What we now desperately need is heavy machinery to clear the rubble. I have my staff on the ground, but it's impossible just to rely on the strength alone to clear this. Authorities are bracing for much worse as reports filter in from outlying areas, in particular Donggala, a region of 300,000 people north of Palu, and closer to the epicenter of the quake. Speaking from Jakarta, journalist Tomo Soet Jipto told Al Jazeera 11 of the recorded deaths were from Donggala, but a clearer picture on the situation there has yet to emerge. The National Disaster Agency spokesperson insisted that up until now, they still receive no official information in terms of casualties and damage. Nearby city of Mamuju was also ravaged. Little information was available due to damage earth. More than half of the 560 inmates in Palu's prison escaped after its walls collapsed during the quake, according to state agency news agency Antara, while more than 100 inmates escaped from a prison in Donggala. All right, so massive destruction happening there. Moving on to talk about climate change and what it means and what to do and what could be done. This is from The Guardian, and this is from today. Climate change and the true cost of economic growth. Readers respond to George Monbiot's request to start a conversation about the links between climate breakdown and consumerism. All right, conversations. If George Monbiot really wants to get people talking about the connection between climate change and the economy, he'd do better to find a different question to how do we stop growth? While growth continues, we'll never kick our fossil fuel habit. Well, there you go. And here we go with people saying, just unable to take, I'm sure, on board that concept. The elephant in the room is the assumption that nature's resources and capabilities are so large that they can be considered infinite and so excluded from the economic cost of production. This has an unintended consequence of rewarding destruction. Hence the German situation in Hambacher. Lignite has value because it can be sold to be burned. The 12,000-year-old forest has none unless the trees are cut down for economic use. And in an infinite world, there are always more 12,000-year-old forests. This is a major, major problem. And the idea that, the idea of abundance, infinite abundance. And I don't know, where the seed of this idea is. It's always clearly in religion, especially the Christian religion, there's this, assumption of abundance, go forth and multiply, and, man has dominion over the earth, and et cetera, et cetera. There isn't a respect for the role of nature in the actual support of humankind. And there also seems to be this kind of like quasi-spiritual abundance kind of like mental, people are always talking about manifesting and abundance, and and I see it kind of like, I see it kind of everywhere, that it's just accepted that that's how things work. The secret, just drawing things to your life. And it's kind of the same as like praying for, whatever you want, right? Praying for wealth, or praying for a new car, or praying for, college tuition for your kid. And it is indirect. It is in direct opposition of the caretaking of the environment, to continually think that we deserve or should earn or be able to earn and have all the things that we want to have, or have all the money that we want to have, eat all the food that we want to eat, buy all the things that we want to buy. This idea is a direct threat to the environment, and but it seems to be gaining more power, this idea, this abundance idea, this infinite, like we have everything we need, and this, it is based in God. It is, trust God will always give you everything you need. And, on some level there is providing for people's welfare, but, at what cost? At what, I don't see God providing for the welfare of animals right now. I don't see God providing for the welfare of species or trees or, or Arctic ice. God's not doing so well in that area. So it's super speciesist and super like humanist in kind of the grossest way, in kind of the ugliest way. And I don't really know how. It's just reinforcing the whole, like, we're okay, we're going to be okay, and everything that we're doing is just fine. And it's not just fine, and it's not okay, and it's not infinite abundance. I'm sorry, that's just false. And it's a little infuriating, a little frustrating, because I just see a lot of like self-help, motivational speaker, guru types, and even on down to people that are just kind of, kind of conducting maybe healing sessions, or, people that are concerned with helping people through trauma and people through, all of that stuff. Like, all those things are great, but, at some point you have to take into account that we are not the only entities on the planet. We're not the only entities in the solar system. We just have a very human-centric view of the world, and it's getting worse every day. And honestly, I think there's actually some religious texts to dispute all of that stuff. I think that's cherry picking to, the nth degree, when we want to pick out the things that tell us that we can have everything we want, or we can pray to God for anything we want. I think there's also plenty of religious texts telling people to live simply, to cast out the money changers from the temple, to eschew wealth and riches in the pursuit of truth and spiritual cleanliness or spiritual purity. I don't hear a lot of talk about that anymore. That I used to hear that when I was younger, and I think that used to be part of the spiritual guidance, was to have less in order to give more, or to have more, or to have a better connection with God. Like, that's all gone now. Now it's just like, get in touch with God and get your connection with God going, and then you can have everything you want. You could have your Hummer, and you could have a boat, and you could have a jet ski, and you could have a vacation. Like, you can have anything. And it's absolute madness, and it's absolutely untrue. It's it's false. I wish that I could tell people that this was false without upsetting their whole little, like, rose-colored neo-spiritual outlook on life. And I'm rambling about this, but it's just really frustrating. Anyways, the Earth is not infinite. The universe is really big, but the Earth is not that big, and the Earth and its abundance is not infinite at all in any way, shape, or form, and we need to live within those guardrails. And we're not. Let's go back. This form of thinking might have been useful simplification when human population And activities were at the levels of the Enlightenment, when much of the philosophy that still drives the economy was developed. Indeed, from any one individual, the world is still a remarkably big place, and it is difficult to imagine it running out of anything. But a resource that would have supplied an Enlightenment-sized population for 500 years would last today. Today's just 35 years, excuse me. That's a very oddly written sentence. And that is without considering increased rates of consumption. Maybe the better question is, how do we rewrite the rules of our economy to reward activities that nourish our future rather than those that destroy it? Without reference to George Monbiot's article and Sebastian Thibault's brilliant illustration, may I make two suggestions? First, that cycling in the UK is made much more user-friendly. At present, only the most intrepid would dare to cycle on our roads, whereas in Holland, cycling is an option for all ages, shapes, and sizes, not just lycra-clad athletes. Second, when resources are scarce, it makes sense to introduce a fair system of rationing. I remember the rationing of food, clothing, and fuel in the 1940s. It was tiresome but necessary, and it ensured that no one in the UK starved. Rather than destroy our environment, we need to introduce a system of mileage rationing for people's use, using modes of transport which run directly or indirectly on fossil fuels. I don't believe it's a basic human right to be able to jet here, there, and everywhere with no restrictions. Again, it's going to have to be from the top, but people are going to have to be mentally prepared for this. Or from the bottom, and people are going to have to be mentally prepared for this. That was from, I'm not going to read everybody's names. I'm just going to kind of check through some of these letters here. George Monbiot is right again, but is there any chance we could get together with, say, Owen Jones, Caroline Lucas, and Justin Welby to tell us how practically to get from where we are to where we should be without catastrophic unemployment, poverty, and civil unrest? There is no way unless somebody thinks through what it means to switch our economy to a different economy. Regarding climate change, be the change you wish to see in the world. Stop driving fossil fuel cars. Become vegetarian. Consume less. Use less energy. Do not follow fashion. Do not upgrade phones with every new model. Buy products, including clothes, furniture, and household items to last. And or, I'm going to interject, maintain all of those things. Do not throw them away unless they're thoroughly used up. Recycle everything: plastic, glass, metal, and organic matter. Take furniture, clothes, DVDs, CDs, and everything else that is still usable to charity shops. Another letter, George Monbiot considers the mismatch between economic growth and environmental sustainability on a global scale. At an individual level, we all need to forget what everyone else might be doing and tailor our activities and consumption to much reduced totals. This has to mean a much simplified lifestyle, being happy with our personal relationships, reducing most forms of competition, and devoting our time to caring for other members of society. It means a fundamental change of attitude to everyone else at a political level. We need to replace competitive politics with cooperative politics. And I like that point a lot. Competition, is kind of the basis for our lifestyle and for our, survival of the fittest mentality. We don't need to compete for resources. We don't need to compete for food. We don't need to compete for money. What if elections weren't competitions, but more like forums by people on, what if candidates were put forward by, a widespread, not, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but like by widespread vote across the country. And, all that was an all access, open internet driven kind of endeavor. Like our political system could look totally and should look totally different. The internet gives us a means with which to actually have people connected to what's happening on a daily and even hourly basis. At an individual level, we all need to forget what everyone else might be doing and tailor our activities and consumption to much reduced totals. Right. Left and right politics is redundant, as are most of our politicians. As Larry Elliott once said in a related context, best of luck with that. All right, that's pretty much all the letters. That leads me to a comment I wanted to read, but darn if I didn't lose it. I'm still working on my old computer, by the way, because it's actually become a whole thing to actually get all the things I need onto my new computer in order to make these videos happen. Sometimes technology makes it easy and sometimes it makes it hard. But soon, we'll figure that out. Okay, any day now, we're going to get into this. This is from Boyd. What can anyone do to help, quote unquote? So let's say we had an amazing restoration agriculture that is sustainable, that would store 2 billion tons a year of carbon. What is the annual carbon production? 40 billion tons or something. In 2014, it was 40 tons. Okay, so let's say we then have huge algae farms that eat up carbon and create our new food supply. That would be another 2 billion tons a year. Okay, then let's say we switch to renewables. Great, but global dimming means we just doubled warming. So let's say we use what does Wadhams want? Cloud water to reflect sunlight. So we do that, and it works. And so let's say that we got rid of the global dimming effect problem. So, okay, now we cut emissions of carbon to zero, and we're still storing 4 billion tons a year. So now we still have the already positive feedbacks of Mother Nature to consider. The ESAS methane bomb is already going off, so that will double global warming again. When you factor in permafrost carbon, oops, back to square one. Yes, all the above assumes a complete shutdown of the U.S. military empire and complete revolution that completely redirects society and sustainability. Just that green, quote unquote, vision would cause so much chaos since it goes against everyone's hardwired thinking. It would be amazingly wacky to consider. It is, but consider we must, because we're going to be considering a whole lot of things real soon, whether we like it or not. We have no choice. We have no choice but to change our lifestyle. We do not have a choice. So the choice is we either let it happen to us catastrophically, or we try and choose some kind of organized walk down from where we are. Not saying that that's going to be successful. It probably won't be, but I'm going to finish with this from the daily costs, which I can't really stand. The daily costs. The full extent to which the fossil fuel industry, companies like Shell and Exxon, knew as early as the 1970s how their combustible products were contributing to irreversible warming of the planet became public knowledge over the last few years. A series of painstakingly researched articles published. Did I read the title of this? The oil companies not only knew fossil fuels caused climate change, they knew how bad it would get. This is from September 23rd, posted by D'Artagnan. Industry totally aware and informed. We already know all this, by the way. For decades, about the inevitable warming certain to occur as more and more carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels was released into the atmosphere. In fact, the oil industry, and Exxon in particular, have the best climate models available, superior to those relied on by the scientific community, and armed with the foreknowledge developed through those models. Exxon and the other oil companies planned and executed an elaborate, cynical, long-term strategy to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in a comprehensive propaganda effort designed to raise doubts about the existence and cause of climate change, a phenomenon they well knew was irrefutable based on their own research. But by 2016, the industry's lobbying to discredit the science of climate change had surpassed $2 billion. Meanwhile, as the newly discovered documents reported in The Guardian attest, the same companies were preparing projections of what type of world they would be leaving for the rest of humanity. Again, they all know about this. In the 1980s, oil companies like Exxon and Shell carried out internal assessments of the carbon dioxide released by fossil fuels, forecasted planetary consequences of these emissions. In 1982, for example, Exxon predicted that by about 2060, CO2 levels would reach around 560 parts per million, double the pre-industrial level. And this would push the planet's average temperature up by about 2°C over then current levels, and even more compared to pre-industrial levels. Shell's internal projections made in 1988 were even more ominous, finding that CO2 levels could double as early as 2030. As it turns out, the Earth passed the 400 parts per million mark in 2014 for the first time in 2.5 million years. Both Shell and Exxon predicted devastating levels of sea level rise, inundation of massive swaths of arable farmland, and vast destruction of the planet's ecosystems. Shell specifically noted that new sources of precipitation would likely be required to compensate for the lack of renewed sources of fresh water. Exxon, not to be outdone, predicted that parts of the American Midwest would be transformed into deserts. The Exxon report, also hidden from the public, was leaked in 2015. The Shell assessment, which was kept under wraps until it was leaked earlier this year, specifically warned that it was imperative for policy changes to be implemented immediately. By the time global warming becomes detectable, it could be too late to take effective countermeasures. You mean like right now, to reduce the effects or even destabilize the situation? Because the early global warming is becoming detectable, absolutely. As pointed out in the Guardian's report, neither Shell nor Exxon ever took responsibility for the destructive impact of their own products. The Shell report specifically placed the onus on governments and consumers to check out their thirst for fossil fuels, to check it out. Check out our thirst for fossil fuels. As the Guardian article points out, they may have made sense except for the fact that both companies then chose to embark on a plan over the next 3 years to deliberately disinform both governments and consumers regarding the role of fossil fuels played in altering the Earth's climate. But we already know this. We already know this. They know it's bad. They know bad things are coming. What exactly are their plans, I wonder, besides hiding underground in bunkers? If the military knows, and they've known this for decades, what are the real plans, I wonder? What are their escape plans or containment plans or mitigation plans, or, what's the plan? Because they couldn't have just known this was coming and then they just left it at that. Like, here it comes. Okay. They clearly, somebody thought this through. A few people thought this through. Time will tell. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.